So I guess, Jennifer, we might as well start with the big story today, the fact that the federal government finally had to step in and basically bring port workers in Montreal and Vancouver back to the table. But then now they have to deal with Canada Post. So let's first of all deal with the port situation. And obviously the NDP not happy with this. Where are we on this?
Well, the NDP is playing from the typical cassette, the right to strike, and they're on the side of the unions. That's their base, obviously, with the NDP. Minister McKinnon mentioned that they were at an impasse. We know that the unions aren't happy with it, but we know that, for example, the Board of Trade of Vancouver is very happy with this. A lot of people probably wouldn't have been happy with it in a couple of days. I mean, something that was interesting, because this would have started to affect pretty much all Canadians. I mean, if we're looking at the Port of Montreal and the Port of Vancouver, that could have the effect of shutting down the economy. Now, it's also having the Canada Industrial Relations Board order back to work. They have also avoided having the need to pass back to work legislation, and which is not clear that they would have been able to get the support of all parties to be able to do that. So I think it was probably the best move, and that it didn't go on. That the strikes won't be going on for a protracted period of time, because it could really have the impact of shutting the economy down just before the holidays.
So let me ask the question, because I asked this earlier on as well. So here you have, political parties who've been posturing to try to get the Liberals or Justin Trudeau to step down, call an election, bring down the government, whatever you want to say. Here's an opportunity, you would think, given the fact that we know the NDP are not on side with this decision by the Liberals. Is this potentially something they could rally around to say, okay, it's time to bring down this government, or not?
Well, it could, but, unlike some of the other parties, the NDP is in the absolute worst position to be able to run an election. They don't have any money. They don't have any candidates. It's fine to posture and to play from your usual cassette. I mean, but you need to be election ready and campaign ready, and the NDP right at this moment is far from it.
All right, so we move on from that to the Canada Post situation. We have a 72-hour notice. They can go on strike by Friday. You expecting the same thing to happen?
Well, it seems to be part of a pattern, and equally, we don't necessarily, Canadians, I'm going to say we, the larger we don't necessarily want this affecting holiday shipments. I mean, people are relying considerably less on Canada Post than they used to for holiday shipments. But, it is still something that people rely on to send their holiday cards, to send gifts, and to do things, and for regular business, so it is possible. We'll have to see. Maybe I'm sure that the postal unions are watching this with great interest of what happened in the ports today.
I wonder, too, when we mentioned this earlier on, Canada Post has been bleeding money for years, or this is not necessarily new, but when we say money, we're talking millions and millions of dollars. They try to sort of revamp their business to take advantage, of e-shopping. It hasn't really worked. You think there's any chance that, someone's going to call for the privatization of Canada Post?
I'm surprised it hasn't really happened already, because when we're looking at, I live on a street where there are lots of residential buildings, and most of the traffic on the street, honestly, is Amazon trucks and other delivery types of things. So, once in a while you see a Canada Post truck to deliver parcels and packages, but, few and far between, honestly. So I'm surprised that there haven't been more calls for the privatization of Canada Post.
All right. Can we, I haven't talked about this at all other than mentioning it the other day. So Quebec has now adopted something called Bill 72, which basically sets rules for tips. But beyond tips and the fact that you're now not supposed to charge them, of course, on the gross bill, but on your net bill pre-tax, in grocery stores as well. What's going on with this bill exactly beyond the tipping issue?
Well, yes, I think actually Bill 72 is great. So, a frequent critic of Simon-Jeanlin Barrette, but, credit where it's due. Bill 72 is great. It's got pretty much 4 prongs. So you mentioned the tipping issue, which I think a lot of Quebecers will be extremely happy for. And the grocery issues where you... The price, so not all groceries are subject to GST, but a lot of things are subject to GST, so snack foods and stuff like that. So that needs to be clearly indicated. If an item is bundled, the price per unit has to be indicated so that the consumer can determine whether or not it's really worth it to buy the bundled item or whether or not it's better to buy a unit. The 2 other elements that are a little bit lesser known, but they're quite important. A limit on balloon loans, which a balloon loan is something where you would add negative equity. So if you were going to buy a car, for example, you could add the negative equities to something that you already owe for your current vehicle. And what the minister said, and he's absolutely correct, is it creates a situation where the consumer is in a downward spiral of debt that it's very, very hard to be able to get out of. So they're putting some limits around that. And the final element is interesting because, I mean, you don't really think of people going door to door and selling things. However, this aspect is the subject of an average of 400 complaints a year, and this is door to door HVAC sales. So, for example, heating and air conditioning. Mm-hmm. And basically what it entails is that those salespeople that arrive at your front door are not able to enter into any type of a legal contract with you on that spot. And this is in order to avoid practices that obviously have been subject of the Consumer Protection Bureau here in Quebec.
Hold on, I'm confused. So they come to your door, they're trying to sell you something, and now the law will not allow for a contract to be signed at the door? Was there like a waiting out period?
I'm not really sure how that works. I've never had somebody sell me things at the door, but apparently they're not allowed to enter into a legal contract because apparently they were showing pictures of things that weren't even in your dwelling and stuff like that. There have been some shoddy practices. Okay. So I guess maybe you would have to add another step in the sales process. So maybe there would be, you would get into your maybe a memorandum of understanding with the salesperson, and then,
or maybe nothing would be binding for a certain number of days, so you would have time to change your mind. They do that with other things as well, I think, right?
Well, I think that's probably what it is because, but I think that overall, I mean, it's a great bill. And obviously the greater known thing, the tipping thing, as we know, tipping went way out of control during the pandemic. And whereas a lot of things have gone back to pre-pandemic, the tipping pandemic is not, you're tipping everybody that you see basically these days.
Yeah, you want to pick something up, tip. You want to take it home, tip. No, it had to be done. I'm glad it's being done. And I think a lot of people maybe at the beginning didn't understand that, they hand you that machine, your 15% is on top of what the tax is on whatever you just spent. And the fact that they finally adjusted that is, as you said, it's a good idea. It's hard to find fault with this. Real quick, Jennifer, we had the Liberals have their convention over the weekend. You have a note here with respect to the youth wing. What's this about?
So a couple of weeks ago, there was an issue between a riding association president that was having an issue with the weighted youth vote. So you might recall we talked about the rules and how there's the rules for the Quebec Liberal Party leadership. It's favoring regions so that the candidates need to be able to get a certain amount of new members and it supports over multiple administrative regions, but that the youth, their support is weighted at 33% of the vote. So that was going to be determined this weekend. And I, because I'm a leadership geek in a big way, I was waiting to see what the answer to that question would be, whether or not they were maintaining that weight, because that's going to have a major impact on who's going to, take the lead, because there are candidates that are a lot more appealing to younger people than others. And so the answer is that apparently, yes, they are keeping the 33% weighted vote for the leadership.
We didn't mention this, but you might as well tie into this. We had a poll out today showing that the federal Liberals in Quebec are now second to the, believe it or not, the Conservatives.
I know, I saw that. And what I thought was really interesting was the youth vote. Speaking of youth, and the 33% that are supporting the Conservatives. And what is interesting in Quebec is we're a very entrepreneurial province, and particularly youth, they're entrepreneurs. They're interested in, and that tends to, it's a conservative tendency or, in any event. So I think that they're not leaning towards the NDP, when at the provincial level, I don't know if this is going to translate into support for the CAQ or to Monsieur Duhaime, or if they're going to stick with, Québec solidaire. But the youth is on the move, and they're being given a lot of power. So it'd be interesting to see what happens here.
Something worth watching. Jennifer, thanks so much.